Up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Welcome in, everybody. Happy Monday. It's a game day Monday. The Broncos have a matchup, an AFC matchup in the backyard on Monday night in prime time against the Cleveland Browns. And we got a lot to get into today. So there's no one who I'd rather do it with, per usual, on a Monday and sometimes on Fridays, than James Merilatt, who's with me again today. James, sporting some retro Broncos gear.
Broncos gear. That's right. That's right. People thought I was going to show up in my Rust jersey
But
today.
it's probably dirty. It's in the wash.
I mean, it's a Broncos game day. I'm dressed for the occasion. It feels like it's been a while because we were off a couple days for Thanksgiving.
I know.
So.
I was off a little bit longer than that. Yeah. So it's been good. It feels good. It feels good to be back in the chair.
All right.
And we got a lot going on. But before we get to the Broncos, I do want to touch on what a wild weekend we had in college football. And it's rivalry weekend. It happens every year at this time of year. So it's not like it's, unprecedented or something we're not used to. But tell me if you felt the same. I felt like it was abnormally violent.
Yes.
On rivalry week this way. I mean, we had four at least that I was able to see with my own eyes, 4 to 5 separate brawls on the field post-game, with everything from pepper spray in Ohio State, Michigan to tridents being placed, pitchforks being placed by Arizona State, and flags and helmets being thrown into the stands. And I think that was NC State, North Carolina. Just what did you make of all the flag planting and the backyard brawling that we saw on Saturday?
Well, I thought overall the whole situation was ridiculous, right? So it does show how quickly copycat nature can happen now with social media, right? Like back in the day, it would have seen, I saw it last year, so we'll do it next year. Now it's like, I just saw it on my phone. It happened 12 minutes ago in Tallahassee or whatever. Let's do it ourselves. All right, so here's my take on it. So I thought Steve Sarkisian hit the nail on the head for Texas when he stopped his team from doing anything when they won in College Station. And he talked about, hey, we're going to win with some class. That's how we would want people to treat us if they beat us in Austin. That's the exact right approach as a visiting team, right? I thought Dan Lanning had the right approach, I don't know, a couple of months ago when he called a timeout late at the Big House and he let his team look around and see all the people leaving as Oregon was beating Michigan. Perfect. Like, send the home crowd home sad. That's your revenge.
Yeah.
Go party it up and play music in the visiting team locker room. That's fine. To go try to disrespect their field, I think is ridiculous. So I think Steve Sarkisian hit the nail on the head. That said, because that would be my approach if I was coach of a visiting team. If I was the coach of a home team and somebody was trying to do that, my response to my team would be, hey, fellas, if you got so much fight in you, where the hell you been the last 60 minutes?
Yep.
Right? If you wanted to defend your home field, where the hell you been the last 60 minutes? That would be my approach to it. So I think both sides are wrong in it. I do kind of understand I just lost. I'm mad. Now you're disrespecting me. I'm going to fight.
Sure.
So if I had to
pride.
pick who's wrong, the visiting team being a bad sport about it, being a bad winner is more wrong than the losing team trying to defend their territory.
Here's where I'm at with it. I'm less on the side of both sides are wrong, and I'm more on the side of we just got too much freaking stuff going on, because in the midst of all this, you've also got students and fans storming the field.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't just happen for home game wins now. It's like the opposing fans will run onto the road stadium, and it just so you've got journalists and TV crews on the field trying to do their job.
Yep.
You've got fans and students and bystanders storming the field, which they're not allowed to do, but happens all the time. So you can't have business trying to go on with TV and radio and newspaper and all those journalists on the field doing their post-game stuff. Students rushing the field to get their student experience, because that's important too, right? You're a college kid, how exciting, yada, yada, yada. And have the propensity for violence between it. You can't have all those things going on at once, because somebody's going to get hurt.
Well,
and you already had journalists and coaches and police officers getting sprayed with pepper spray and friendly fire.
Yeah.
So you're going to have So what? Then a student gets tagged with pepper spray, and you can say, well, he's somewhere he shouldn't have been. Okay, true. But now what? He's going to turn around and sue the school, the opposing school, or somebody gets hurt because they're yanking flags out of the ground and throwing them across the field, and somebody gets a stray. And it's just, I'm not against a lot of those things in a vacuum, but when you have 5 vacuums running simultaneously in the same room, it's too much.
It's total chaos.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. And they almost need to there needs to be some order to things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it needs to go this way because it's a little bit old fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
But if you watch a high school game, you watch a youth football game, each team comes down the 50-yard line, shakes hands, and away you go.
Yep.
Everybody knows where you're going to be. There's not the coaches getting into it at the end of the Penn State game over here. This nonsense going on over here.
Or not getting into it if you're Ryan Day, just standing with your hands in your pockets. By the way.
Right. What are you doing?
Right.
So it almost is like they have to kind of create areas where certain things are going to happen. But I also just think it starts at the top. So win or lose, when we do the 50-yard line handshake, first thing, as we're getting ready to go out, I tell my team 2 words. Good game. That's it. I don't want to hear anything else. Right? So if you won, tell them good game. You appreciate them and respect them as opponent. If you lose, be a good sport about it. You can be mad. You should be mad. Nobody likes losing, but they beat you. Tell them good game.
Yeah.
Doing something else is just disrespecting yourself, because if they didn't play well and they beat you, like,
well, and then you
what's
add in another added layer with a lot of teams. I guess I don't know for a fact that every team does it after every game, but you have a lot of teams that they'll do the joint huddle up and prayer afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, we just got done beating the snot out of each other, and I just smacked the guy in the face with my loose helmet, and we planted a flag and there's pepper spray and all that. Let's just go say a quick, Hail Mary afterwards. Like, what are we doing?
Well,
it's like, it doesn't even make sense.
And then you got the whole batch that's going over here with the band to sing the fight song. And you're right. You talked about 5 things going on at once. There's about 14 things going on at once. It's just a mess. You don't see it at NFL games.
No.
So it's not hard. It's not impossible.
And I will say, because I was a college student once upon a time, and I remember kind of the animosity toward rivalry week and even just games in general. There was always it didn't have to be rivalry week for there to be tension and emotion and whatever.
That's football. Emotions run high.
And so I remember that, and but some of my more vivid good memories of that happening were when things happened before the game. Like I vividly remember being at the game when Devin Bush, who was playing at Michigan, went to center field at my home Spartan Stadium and ripped up the turf with his cleats, and they were dragging spikes and nails through the helmet. And then Michigan State then responded by hanging 40 on him and throwing touchdowns with less than a minute left to kind of, to, as Mark D'Antonio put it, stick a stake in them.
That's the way to respond to it.
That's the way to do it. Whereas the memories I have of it being stuff happening post-game are usually negative. I remember 2 Michigan State players getting dismissed from the team and charged with assault with a deadly weapon for beating the other teammates with helmets in the tunnel after the game, because they got to both go through the same tunnel at the big house. So it just, I'm all for the angst and the rivalry, and like Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, like those schools, they freaking hate each other, especially the in-state ones that you'll get, like Florida State, NC, because those guys grow up and go to the same high schools. They play against each other at youth levels, build up, and then they go to opposing colleges, and you get houses divided and all that. I'm all for that. I think that's a beautiful, part of the game. But the way it's manifesting itself sometimes, and I think we saw a grandiose scale of it, and even if this makes me a little bit of get off my lawn guy, it's just a little much.
Oh, without a doubt. I love the passion. That's why we watch. That's why we like sports.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, if it was flatline, we'd be like,
right.
What's
because
the point?
I'm not a guy that can get to a point mentally where I want to physically assault another person outside of the context of football violence and then go shake their hand again.
Well, yeah, I'm with you. And we've seen situations of this in the stands. I mean, years ago, after a Giants-Dodgers game, there was an assault in the parking lot, and the guy ended up, with brain injuries and stuff. There's the famous clip, I think it's in New York, of the Islanders fan or the Rangers fan. They're walking to the subway, and he just turns and starts punching guys.
But
they've got alcohol involved,
crazy, yeah,
right? Not that that's an excuse, but it's okay, we get it. But the coaches and the players and I have higher expectations.
Yeah.
I do. And maybe it is asking a lot because you played this intense game.
Yeah.
But you know what? They've been playing this intense game for 100 years.
Yeah.
This nonsense is relatively new. And it starts with, back in the day, it's T.O. running the football out to the star at Texas Stadium. I think it was still Texas Stadium at the time. And doing that stuff. It's just like, have a little respect for your opponent.
Yeah.
Have a little respect for the place you're
the spirit of competition, keeping it in the lines.
And that I'm going to get off my lawn guy now, but like it's long time been my issue with Nebraska fans, right? They gripe and complain about how they get treated in Boulder. All right. Well, first of all, it's how you behave, right? So I tested this. I walked all the way across campus for a Nebraska CU game wearing Husker gear. You know how many run-ins I got in? 0. Because I didn't act like a Yahoo. But if you come into my house, put your feet up on my coffee table and they're muddy,
right?
I'm going to say something. That's just the way it goes. The best experiences I've ever had, though, Bronco game at the Jets, Bronco game at the Giants, dealing with New York fans, you're jawing back and forth the whole game. And then when it's over, it's a little fist bump. It's a handshake. It's like, hey, good game. Congrats. Away you go. I lost once. I won once. It was fine.
I have memories of, when I was in college, I went to the Michigan State game in 2021 when J.J. McCarthy was actually a freshman. Cade McNamara was still the starter and he wasn't whatever. And Kenneth Walker scored 5 touchdowns. They came back and won. And I bought tickets kind of late in the game. And I was like up in the top section surrounded by Michigan fans. And I was like, I'm in my obnoxious party blazer and I'm totally Michigan State out. And I'm at a home game. So they're technically the visiting fans, even though they live 45 minutes away. And they were all pretty cool. Like it was all, so I think that there's generalities when it comes to that stuff. And I'll even take that to the next step further. I was at the Broncos Raiders game in Vegas just this past Sunday.
Yeah.
And there was a decent amount of Broncos representation at Allegiant. It was not hard to spot all the orange. But we were kind of in a pocket of some Raider fans with some Broncos fans on the peripheral, and walking through the concourse, it was great. They were nice. They were chill. And I think that, I think Raider fans carry a negative stigma about them from their LA, Oakland days. And I do think that the transplanting to Las Vegas has changed some of those demographics and some of those stereotypes that are attached to them. But in terms of being in enemy territory, you could be a lot more hostile than it was in Vegas.
Yeah. I've been to a Broncos Raider game in LA and in Oakland. In LA, the cops came up. I was a kid and told my dad, you might want to get your family out of here before the end of the game. In Oakland, I was sitting up. We were in a suite. So I was the obnoxious guy in the front of the suite screaming at Raiders fans. We didn't get mooned. We got the front side. That was,
I don't know. What
only
do you call
only
that?
in Oakland.
Yeah.
I think it's a sun. Isn't it the sun?
It's the sun.
That's what we were.
Partial eclipse. I don't know.
I was in Kansas City one time and I'm standing in line at a concession stand and all that was fine. Like it wasn't violent by any means. It was just like, oh my gosh, in Kansas City. And this kid had to be 7 years old if he was a day. And he turns around, sees I'm a Broncos fan, does a double take, turns back again, 7 by himself, buying a Coke or whatever. And he goes, F you. Except he didn't say, he full out said it. I'm like, that's fair. That's the kind of animosity I want.
Yeah.
But no trouble. Nobody getting punched. Nobody getting assaulted. It's a very fine line. What I don't want to see it turn into, though, Richie, is when I was in London for the Broncos Jags game a couple years ago, went to a soccer game. And when you buy tickets, you have to say what team you're rooting for. When you go to the game, you're sitting in a specific section for which team you're there to cheer on. Outside the stadium, home team bars, visiting team bars, because they've had so many problems.
Wow.
There's the gap between the two sections of teams is nothing but security guards. It's just like, let's not get to that point.
Right. It becomes like a militant situation.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't need to be like that.
Well, CU made light work of their rivalry week, their senior week. They dispatched Oklahoma State 52-0. And it doesn't feel like that's a game that they should be playing when we're branding it rivalry week. But this is a problem I think that a school like CU has when you conference hop as much as they have. You've kind of diluted a lot of paths. And I know now that they're they were back with, Nebraska and blah, blah, blah. But
It's supposed to be Utah. It was Utah in the Pac-12. I don't know why they didn't just keep that in the Big 12.
But and maybe this will make me get off my long guy again. They missed out on the Big 12 title game. They came close. They got almost all the help they needed. Almost. Surprisingly, came down to Houston needing to beat BYU. Didn't happen, and now it looks like they're projected to play BYU in the illustrious Alamo Bowl. Knowing that this was a 1-win team 2 years ago who went from 1 to 4 and was now knocking on the doorstep of double-digit wins in a season. Pretty hard to knock that when you just look at it in that context. But I got to say, as I sit here right now on Monday, December 2nd, the year of our Lord, 2024, I feel a little bummed. I feel like this was a season that should have gone to higher places.
Yeah, it's a weird mix of emotions because on one hand, I'm with you. I'm disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all you had to do was beat Kansas.
Yeah, they fell for a trap game.
They finished 5-7. They got blown out this past weekend. Like all you had to do was beat Kansas, and you'd be in the Big 12 title game with the chance to go to the playoffs. Like how much fun would it be this week leading up to that? I was going to take my boys to Dallas to go to the game as their Christmas present. Like it was going to be awesome, kind of that once in a blue moon thing. So it's disappointing that didn't happen, but they're 9-3. I'm ecstatic at how far this program has come. They're 9-3. They're going to have the Heisman Trophy winner. They might have the first 2 picks in the draft. They just got a 5-star quarterback to flip and go there. It looks like Prime is going to stay. Like there are so many more lists of pros
in the future,
cons. Even for right now, 2 years ago, Prime was announced on December 1st. I
would have laughed your face
So
off.
that was 2 years ago yesterday.
Yep.
If you'd have said, you're going to be ticked in 2 years because they lost to KU and were this close from having a chance to go to the playoff, I would have laughed.
Yeah.
Would have laughed.
Yeah.
So, it's right now when we're flying low, like in Top Gun 2, we're disappointed. But if you get up there and look at the 30,000 foot view,
I'll just say this: you're right. There's in terms of the future prospects. They got Juju coming in. It looks like Prime is here to stay. For a little bit longer, and the expectation just kind of continues to build. And I think that now that the season has gone down the path that it looks like it's going to, and they're going to miss the conference championship, miss the playoff, and play in a bowl game and all that, you kind of know what the expectation is going to be going forward. But it just feels like not necessarily a Haley's Comet situation, but college football is so chaotic and it's so up and down, especially in this new era with NIL and the ravaging of the transfer portal at degrees that we haven't ever seen it before, and how quickly things can turn positively or negatively. You just never know when things are going to line up for you the way that they have. And this was lined up. The lights were on each side of the runway. You can't beat yourself, and no one's going to beat you. And they let it happen. They can't. You and I sat here on the Friday before and said they're going to win by 20 against Kansas.
And they should have.
And you're a big guy of it depends on, and I hear Stokely say this too about, context matters in terms of how it looks. Well, that wasn't a Kansas State type loss where it was back and forth and you pulled ahead and Kansas State just got one Raheem Moore-esque beat you on a play for a touchdown and broke your heart. Kansas was thumping them all game.
Yeah, they couldn't stop.
Devin Neal was running through tissue paper.
Yeah, they couldn't tackle. It was frustrating.
And they did something, and it's a frustration that I had with CU for good chunks of the year, and it was most evident in that Kansas game, in my opinion. They seemed to start out slow a lot. And this one, they had the bye week and the proximity of it, so that added onto it. But it seemed like a lot of their things, especially offensively, but even defensively, they would start out slow, and then they would just end up over the course of 60 minutes out-talenting another team because they had so many talented players, especially at the skill positions, and in the secondary. It didn't work against Kansas. And I just felt like it was going to happen because we talked about it on Friday. I was like, hey, this has trap game alarms ringing off in my head a little bit. And it just fell the wrong way. So it's not, I think you can say both things. I think you can say that the future is bright for Colorado and this season went better than some people may have expected. But you also, in my opinion, can take new information and reevaluate things as it comes. and understand that this was a team that had the path. They didn't need anyone's help. They controlled their own destiny, and it just tripped and fell. And now we're going to be watching the expanded college football playoff and wondering what would CU have done against that team instead of Boise State or instead of Arizona State if they sneak in, or
no doubt,
whatever.
No doubt. And it is disappointing. And they are that basketball team who comes out and kind of sleepwalks and then thinks they'll just, turn it on. And all of a sudden you have a night where you're not making shots and you get beat. That's what happens. But college football is so different now. It's a chaotic world. And I don't know if there's a team and a coach that are better suited to deal with it and take advantage of it. So that's the other reason to be feeling good about the future, right? Like other programs are trying to figure it out. Coach Prime has it dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I may not like the new world. You may not like the new world. There's a lot of parts of it I do like, but hey, it is what it is. You got to deal with the reality, and they got it figured out.
Well, it's been so long since they've been there that you could argue that in some ways the world of postseason contention is a new world for the Denver Broncos. It's a new old world, and they, like the Buffs were heading into the backstretch of their season, are staring at a situation where they have majority favorable matchups on the rest of their schedule, and all they have to do is keep their head above water and not beat themselves, and they could trip and fall into a postseason wild card berth in the first year with Bo Nix. They play tonight against the Cleveland Browns, who, in all honesty, were a much more beatable team with their first starting quarterback in Deshaun Watson than they have been with Jameis Winston, who has kind of continued this trend of doing this everywhere he goes, of being a veteran backup on a downtrodden middle of the road team and kind of jumping them up a tier or two or getting them up for big games like we saw Cleveland do against Baltimore and Pittsburgh, two bona fide playoff looking teams at this point in the year. What's your gut feeling going ahead of this game tonight?
I think the Broncos will come out and play well. I think they'll win. People are going to take this as a backhanded compliment. I don't mean it that way. They've been very good against bad teams. Their 7 wins are against
teams that are on record of saying they're the best JV team in the NFL.
Their 7 wins are against teams that are 26-57.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's awful. So, but hey, they take care of business. So if they do that tonight, if they do it against the Colts, if they do it against the Bengals, they're to 10 wins, 2 streaks end. They have a winning season. They're into the playoffs. That's all they got to do. The Charger game on the short week doesn't matter. The Chiefs game, if it counts for the Chiefs or not, that game doesn't matter. All you got to do is take care of business, and nobody's been better at that than the Broncos. Almost every other team has a game where they stub their toe against the team they shouldn't. Denver hasn't done that.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't. So they deserve credit for that. I think Sean Payton, and I mentioned this morning with the fellas on the morning show, you go back to COVID, and I was doing a show with Stokely. Remember when the Broncos-Patriots game got moved, and they were so upset that they lost their bye week?
Cam Newton,
They were just so ticked off. It's like, I get it, fellas. It's an inconvenience, but you're getting paid millions of dollars. You're supposed to have the attitude of, hey, we'll play you in the Walmart parking lot. We don't care.
They win that game
Pick
like 18-9 or something. Like McManus kicked 6 field goals. Yeah.
But this year, I think they've gotten rid of a lot of the guys that had that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
They're very much a lunch pail kind of team.
Hard hats. Yep.
They'll show up, take care of business tonight, and worry about their bye week tomorrow morning. I don't think they're going to have any trouble tonight. I think they're going to play just fine.
I think that the fact that this is a primetime game, it's the standalone on a Monday night, so there's no opportunity for it to get caught in the wash. And you have the bye week coming up, but I think this one's a hard one to stub your toe against, especially when you factor in if you're Sean Payton, if you're, Vance Joseph, whoever. You can hey, this is a Browns team that went in and beat a hot Steelers team.
Yep.
They beat that game was a snowstorm, but they beat a red hot Ravens team without scoring an offensive touchdown.
They're the only team to beat Russ as a Steeler.
Yeah. Well, listen, I
got a blizzard, but
you and I might have some. I'm not going to do it yet, but you and I are going to have some. I'm sure you'll enjoy some conversations we might have about Russell Wilson and the Steelers. Maybe next time we end up chatting. Because I'm starting to look and think differently about this Steelers team than maybe I was previously. But
we're sitting on a ticket.
We're
excited about
it. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. We're gonna focus on the other AFC North team in question with the Cleveland Browns. I agree with you. I think that this is a take care of business kind of situation for the Broncos. And I have faith, especially with some of the progression that we've seen offensively in the last couple of weeks, because being in the stands at that Raiders game, they started slow. They started sluggish. And it was it felt similar to the first Raiders game. And we didn't quite have that Gardner Minshew moment as early as we had it in the first game when he threw that end zone pick. But in the themes were similar. They handled Brock Bowers pretty well for the most part. He was going to get you on a couple of chunk plays here and there, but they handled him. Jacoby Myers just always seems to have a good game against Denver, no matter what team he plays for. It drives me nuts. But the defense kind of clamped down at the end. Obviously, Gardner left the game. He got hurt, and they brought in Desmond Ridder, who's not going to be playing because now it's Aiden O'Connell.
That ball game was over as soon as that happened.
Yeah.
Look, there are a few things I think you should kind of be not worried about tonight, but keep an eye on. Cleveland can play defense.
Yeah,
they can. Like they can get
Myles
after
Garrett's a man.
They can get after the quarterback, and that's the number one guy. So that's the first part. They can run the football.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that can control the game, and the Broncos have been better about that this year. But of late, in recent years, they've had a hard time shutting down the run. And then I think this is an underrated thing. Riley Moss isn't playing.
Yeah,
I think he's a very unheralded player on this defense.
Yep.
Because when you're opposite Pat Surtain, you're going to get a ton of looks.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and you're joking about how Jacoby Myers always seems to have a good game against the Broncos and this, that, but we haven't had one of those games where it's like, oh my gosh, this unknown goes for
exactly.
$185, right?
Yeah. There's no Chris Hogan 100-yard game.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That worries me tonight, especially, and this is just me being the fatalist. Jerry Jeudy rolls into town.
So here, I was just going to go there. So do you think, because I agree with you, I think Pat Surtain is going to shadow Jeudy.
That's what I would. But anybody else can beat me tonight.
But I'll tell you this, Cedric Tillman, one of the receivers they got on the other end, he led the NFL in receiving for 3 consecutive weeks. I think it was either late September to early October or, the month of October. He was the hottest receiver in the NFL for 3 weeks and nobody knew about it.
Yep.
So they've got guys that can burn you and get open, and Jameis Winston has proven to be capable enough of getting them the football. That being said, I don't think Jerry Jeudy gets any. Even if the Browns lose, I don't think Jeudy gets a revenge game tonight. I think he's about to enter the no spin zone.
I don't think he does either. But what you can't do is start slow, fall behind, and let the Browns just run the football and rely on their defense. That's a recipe for disaster. You got to come out, have a pretty decent start, and try to make Jameis Winston, try to make that offense one-dimensional. Then you got Benito and everybody, Cooper, pinning their ears back and coming after you. The recipe, if you're the Browns, is get a lead, play ball control, and lean on your defense. Broncos can't let that happen tonight.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that establishing the run game against kind of a reasonable front seven in Cleveland is going to be big. I don't think you're going to be able to come away with a clean win in this game if Bo Nix is your leading rusher and Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin are fighting for who can have higher than 2.6 yards a carry kind of situation. So I have faith. I think that with the offensive progression we've seen in recent weeks, as long as the defense can absorb the loss of Riley Moss for this week, which again, it's not like we haven't seen them. I mean, they lost Alex Singleton earlier in the year and we were like, oh boy, that's the heart of your front seven. That's an anchor. And you might have been, you can kind of forget that he was doing something, at this point, because they look pretty good with Cody Barton.
They haven't missed a beat. Cody Barton's been fine. Justin Sternad's been fine.
But Riley Moss has been to your word, I think you used it right, an unheralded member of this team. Because of what he has actually truly allowed Pat Surtain's brilliance to flourish more.
Correct.
Because you can't just avoid him. And Jaquan McMillan's been doing great things as a slot corner as well. But yeah, they're going to need to not let that chink in the armor rip open the breastplate, so to speak. So score prediction, give it to me.
I think it's going to be low scoring.
I think
it's going to be a doze off kind of night. I think it's 20-13 Broncos.
I was going to say 19-13 was going to be my exact score. A lot of this could be a chunky Will Lutz game.
Yep.
Who's been pretty good. He was definitely the subject of some ire last season, and his tenure in here has been kind of up and down, but this season he's been kind of nails. And I thought it was kind of fun what Bo Nix said when Lutz won Special Teams Player of the Week in the AFC, and he was like, "Hey, I'm happy for my guy, and that's great, but like we're trying to have him kicking 15-yarders."
I don't know that you
going
want
forward.
Your kicker.
Yeah, so I thought that was great, but I think this could be a game where they're going to lean on him a little bit tonight. I do ultimately think they come away with a win. On the way out, just so that I want to make sure we acknowledge it. How excited are you about the addition of Scott Wedgwood and the departure of Justus Annunen in Colorado?
Well, I went to NHLshop.com, got my Wedgwood jersey.
Yeah.
Sorry, sweater.
It's important.
Got that on the way. That's going to be really exciting. Now, I was on with Dan this weekend, and he was asking me about it. It's like, look, I know everybody loves the backup quarterback most of the time, and everybody loves the backup goaltender, right? If you're leaning on Annunen too much, just everybody loved Frankie too, and he had the great run in the playoffs. He won one game 8-6, right? Like, it
was funny watching the two, like Frankie and Kemper switching off, because Kemper might have legitimately been twice the surface area of Pavel Francouz. It was hilarious to watch like this like massive stout rock in Kemper, who still gave up his own fair share of goals, partially because he had one eye. And then Frankie having to like cover so much surface area to try to do the same thing. I agree with you. I think Justus Annunen was he had some moments. He had a reasonable expectation in terms of performance when he was called upon. It usually wasn't in major league crunch time situations, but the playoff, the postseason, the regular season, and ultimately postseason ceiling and success for this team, whether we like it or not, rides on the shoulders of Alexander Georgiev.
It does.
And the addition of a Scott Wedgwood as a veteran backup goalie who's not much else more. If you're needing some clutch, dire performances, because you do, eventually you need.
He's going to fill the Frankie role.
And that Frankie had a role.
Exactly.
And so you're going to need him to do something. But if you're relying on him for more than an occasional spot, give Georgie some rest and just hold water, your outlook's pretty bleak as it is.
Exactly. And it's not as though you would look at it and say, hey, Annunen's the future, right? So they didn't trade away the guy that in 2 or 3 years is going to be the main goaltender. So I think it's a smart move. I think it's a for now move versus for the future move, because the for now is much more important. In the future, I don't think he was that anyway. So it's a fine move. It's not a wow kind of thing, but I don't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah, we lost a nickname, in terms of the guys between the fights, because we have Forgiev and we will have Forgiev forever, which I think it's one of my favorite Colorado sports nicknames that we've had in recent years.
Yeah.
Even though it's a negative connotation and that's never fun, it's accurate and it just fits so perfectly with his actual name. And they called Justus Juice or whatever, which kind of just feels like he didn't want to pronounce his actual name. So
other really good negative nickname going right now is McFlinchy.
I love Mike McFlinchy.
It's so good.
I love Mike McFlinchy.
Every time he has a false start, which feels like once
we had
a game.
Garrett Holds. Now we have Mike McFlinchy.
They're great.
But I did learn, and I guess maybe it doesn't really count as a nickname because it's a title that's given to multiple people. But when I was reading up on Wedgwood, he served as a reserve goalie for the Tampa Bay Lightning during their postseason run to the Cup, but he wasn't playing for the Lightning. So they have what's called, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, they have what's called a black ace.
Okay.
And the black ace is a player that a team who's in the postseason can take a player from a team whose season has ended and have them serve in a reserve role. They can sign them to a reserve role to continue that run because their season for that other player is over. So Scott Wedgwood was the black ace for the Tampa Bay Lightning when they won the Cup in 2020.
Does he get his name on the cup?
That's a good question. I even though I've seen the Stanley Cup in person with my own two eyes, I'm still fuzzy on how exactly it works.
You weren't looking for Scott Wedgwood's name?
I was not looking for Scott Wedgwood. I was honestly just trying to find any legible name.
We would now. Next time the Cup's in the office, we're going to be looking for Scott Wedgwood.
Yeah, well, listen.
People be like, what are you two doing?
There have only been a handful of things in the office that were kind of like, hey, this is coming by. Stop what you're doing and get here. When the Stanley Cup made its way into our studio and eventually did a full hour or segment of radio with us on the air, with the keeper of the Cup, who's a fantastically interesting guy and all the stories he's seen. I've never. There were some people who in this building who I haven't seen in months and months, who were like showing up at 7:30 in the morning to make sure they could get a picture with the cup.
I had the 2 Super Bowl trophies at the time when they'd only won 2 in the trunk of my car overnight. That was a nerve-wracking night to have it parked on the street.
Oh, jeez. I saw a question from some of our listeners here. Please feel free to chime in anytime you want. Bigger question: can we get Mikko Rantanen signed? That does feel like it's kind of just fallen by the wayside conversationally, right? They kind of like ended talks, and it was Mikko's camp was the one who was shutting it down. Hey, we're not going to do it, but the Avs kind of let it get to that point. And I saw some reports from the Pierre LeBruns and the kind of hockey insiders of the world. I saw some reports on social media that Mikko's camp is confident that they think he can get $12 to $15 million a year annually on the open market. And that just feels like that's not a place the Avs can go. They just don't have the money.
This topic will come up then when the trade deadline is looming, because if you're not going to re-sign him, or you don't think you're going to be able to re-sign him, you got to get something for him. You can't have this be a situation like the late, great Dikembe Mutombo, who left for absolutely nothing and signed with the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get something. That'll be a tough thing to swallow heading into what you hope is a cup run. But that's the decision that's on the horizon if the Avs can't get this done.
Well, there's no shortage of things for us to look back on and reminisce on. If you're the Buffs, look ahead to. If you're the Broncos and the Avs, and it just we are fortunate. We're blessed in this town that as of this moment where we sit, we've got 3 very relevant sports franchises, all 4, if you want to count the Buffs, all participating simultaneously in meaningful action in their sports. And I, for one, am not going to take it for granted. James, as always, it's a pleasure chatting with you. Can't wait to do it again later this week. And for all of you out there, thank you for listening. Please give us a follow on our social media channels, on YouTube, at Denver Sportscom. We'd love to hear from you. We love interacting with you, and we'll see you again tomorrow.